What if the promise of safety, wealth, and a better life was actually the most dangerous trap of all? What if the person who claimed to rescue you from poverty was quietly building a prison around you, brick by brick, smile by smile? This is a case that forces us to question how power disguises itself as love, how control can look like generosity, and how a crime can be executed so cleanly that the wrong man pays the price while the true architect walks away untouched. In the early 2000s, in a peaceful coastal region of the Philippines, a young woman in her early 20s believed she had finally outrun the life she was born into. She grew up surrounded by scarcity, where education was fragile, jobs were uncertain, and survival often meant sacrifice. When she met a wealthy foreign businessman, older, confident, and financially secure, he appeared to be everything her circumstances had denied her. He spoke of stability, protection, and a future where money would never again be a source of fear. To her family, the relationship felt like a blessing. To her community, it looked like a fairy tale, a young Filipina bride rescued by love and opportunity. But fairy tales often end where real life begins. After the wedding, the dynamic between them slowly shifted. At first, the husband's involvement in her life seemed caring. He offered advice. He made suggestions. He wanted to help her adjust. Over time, suggestions became expectations, and expectations hardened into rules. He insisted on knowing where she went, who she met, and how long she stayed out. He framed his control as concern, his monitoring as protection. He reminded her, often subtly, sometimes directly, that everything she had now came from him. The house they lived in was large, modern, and beautiful, but it felt strangely quiet. Cameras were installed under the pretense of security. Her phone was replaced with one he paid for. Her social circle slowly shrank as friends stopped visiting, unsure of their welcome. Love, once promised, began to feel transactional. Affection came with conditions. Silence was rewarded. Obedience was expected. To the outside world, nothing seemed wrong. The husband was polite, generous, and well-respected. He donated to local causes. He smiled easily. No one suspected that behind that carefully maintained image was a man obsessed not with love, but with ownership. Everything changed when the young woman began volunteering at a local community outreach program. It was there that she met an elderly American retiree who had moved abroad after losing his wife years earlier. He was not wealthy. He held no influence, but he spoke to her as an equal. He listened without interrupting. He treated her not as something to be managed, but as someone to be understood. Their connection developed slowly and quietly. There was no dramatic beginning, no reckless decision. It began with conversations, shared meals, and moments of laughter that felt unfamiliar in her controlled world. For her, it wasn't about romance in the traditional sense. It was about kindness. It was about being seen. What she didn't realize was that her husband had already noticed the change. Investigators would later uncover digital records suggesting that her phone activity had been monitored long before any confrontation occurred. Deleted messages, location data, and email access logs painted a disturbing picture. This was not a man reacting impulsively to betrayal. This was someone gathering information, watching patterns, and waiting. The husband never confronted her directly. Instead, he became calmer, almost gentler. He planned dates. He spoke about their future. He suggested they celebrate their upcoming wedding anniversary with a private dinner at home, just the two of them. To her, it felt like hope. Maybe things were changing. Maybe he was trying again. On the night of the anniversary, the house was quiet. The meal was carefully prepared. Wine was poured. Candles were lit. According to later forensic findings, nothing appeared unusual at first. There were no signs of struggle. No raised voices reported by neighbors. By all outward appearances, it was a peaceful evening. Hours later, the young woman collapsed. Emergency services were called, but it was too late. Her death was initially classified as natural causes, a sudden medical episode, stress perhaps. These things happened. The husband was calm, cooperative, and visibly grieving. He held her hand as authorities arrived. He answered questions politely. There was no immediate reason to suspect foul play, but something didn't sit right. A routine toxicology report revealed traces of a rare substance, one that could cause rapid organ failure while mimicking natural illness. It was not commonly available, but it was not impossible to obtain. The discovery quietly shifted the case from tragedy to potential homicide. Attention quickly turned to the elderly American volunteer. Phone records showed communication between him and the victim. Witnesses confirmed they had spent time together. Investigators, under pressure to act, began constructing a narrative that fit neatly: a secret affair, jealousy, and an older man with motive. He was arrested, questioned aggressively, and portrayed as someone who had crossed moral boundaries. What was missing from that narrative was evidence. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses placing him at the house that night, no proof he had access to the poison, but circumstantial suspicion was enough. The idea of an illicit relationship was easier to sell than the possibility that a respected, wealthy husband had orchestrated his wife's death. During the trial, the husband testified as a grieving spouse. He spoke of betrayal. He spoke of heartbreak. He allowed investigators to believe that he was a victim too, of infidelity, of deception, of humiliation. His financial resources secured skilled legal counsel and favorable expert testimony. The elderly volunteer, meanwhile, faced the system alone. The jury convicted. The sentence was severe. A man who had never committed a violent act in his life was sent to prison, his reputation destroyed, his final years defined by a crime he did not commit. The real killer returned to his life, wealth intact, grief publicly displayed, suspicion quietly dismissed. But truth has a way of resurfacing. Years later, a digital forensics review conducted during an unrelated investigation uncovered overlooked data. Encrypted backups from the husband's personal devices revealed detailed notes, searches related to undetectable toxins, and timestamps that placed him alone with the victim in the hours before her death. The pattern was unmistakable. This was not an emotional outburst. It was a calculated act. By the time authorities reopened the case, the husband had left the country. Legal battles followed. Appeals were filed. The elderly man's conviction was eventually overturned, but justice came late. His health had deteriorated. His life had been irrevocably altered. The man responsible was never brought to trial. This case is not just about murder. It is about power imbalance. It is about how financial dependence can silence victims, how control can hide behind generosity, and how narratives are shaped by who society finds believable. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about how investigations prioritize convenience over complexity, and how easily the wrong person can be sacrificed to preserve a comfortable story. The young woman's name rarely appears in headlines now. She is remembered as a victim, but not fully understood. She was not reckless. She was not naive. She was trapped in a system where survival required compromise, and escape came at an unimaginable cost. So ask yourself this: when does protection become possession? When does kindness become control? And how many crimes go unnoticed simply because the wrong person looks guilty? If this story made you question what you think you know about power, justice, and truth, you're not alone. Subscribe to Netflix Crime Story for more shocking true crime mysteries, deep investigations, and stories that challenge the narratives we're given.